So you might have heard that this week the Supreme Court handed down a ruling that could completely transform American elections, and you assume that that must have been exaggerated or alarmist or sensationalized, but the reality is most people still have no idea quite how big this actually is. So let me explain what happened, why legal experts are calling it one of the biggest voting rights rollbacks in decades, and how it could impact everything from Congress to your kid's school district. In a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court struck down Louisiana's second majority black congressional district, ruling that the state relied too heavily on race when drawing the map. And actually, just moments ago, the news broke that Louisiana announced plans to delay their primaries because of that ruling. That might sound hyper-specific and super local, and you're nowhere near Louisiana, but the implications are national. Stay with me. This case centers around Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which is one of the last major protections from the civil rights era, allowing voters to challenge maps that diluted minority voting power. Meaning, for decades, if a district map had a discriminatory effect, even if lawmakers didn't openly admit racist intent, courts could still strike it down. But now the Supreme Court has dramatically changed those rules. According to legal analysts, challengers may now effectively have to prove intentional discrimination, which civil rights groups say is almost impossible in modern politics because lawmakers can simply claim that maps were drawn for partisan reasons instead of racial ones, which are often concurrent. For instance, in many southern states, race and party often overlap, meaning black voters overwhelmingly vote Democratic, and racial gerrymandering can now potentially be justified as partisan gerrymandering. Justice Elena Kagan warned in her dissent that the court had essentially eviscerated the Voting Rights Act while technically leaving it alive. And civil rights advocates are calling it the biggest rollback of minority voting protections in generations. This ruling could unleash the nationwide redistricting war that states have been teetering on all year long. Republican-controlled states across the South are already discussing eliminating majority black districts entirely, aka erasing Democratic votes in their upcoming midterm elections. After the ruling came down, Tennessee Republicans immediately began talking about redrawing the state's last Democratic-held district in Memphis. And in turn, Democrats are threatening retaliation in blue states. AOC warned that if Republicans aggressively redraw maps in the South, then Democrats may respond in kind by redrawing in places like how California did to maximize Democratic seats. Now, I know this all sounds super procedural, but this is how it could impact you. This could mean fewer competitive elections, more extreme politicians, and less accountability overall. The more aggressively maps are drawn to protect one party, the fewer districts become truly competitive, because what ends up happening is politicians choose their voters instead of voters electing their politicians, and very quickly, our votes become far less significant in any election outcome, which is really the centerpiece of a functioning democracy. In other words, in most districts, the general election barely matters anymore. The real contest will happen in partisan primaries dominated by the most politically active voters. And experts warn that creates incentives for politicians to appeal to more ideological extremes instead of moderate or independent voters. And it may not stop at Congress. Advocates warn the logic behind this ruling could impact state legislatures, local councils, judgeships, even school boards, because district maps exist at nearly every level of government. The ruling also comes during an already escalated political arms race over redistricting. Trump pushed Republican states like Texas to redraw maps mid-decade ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. Democratic states like California and Virginia responded with maps favoring Democrats. And now both parties are openly talking about maximum warfare when it comes to district maps. And election analysts say that the biggest impact may not even happen this year, but in 2028 and beyond, as more states redraw maps under the court's new standard. So while this ruling may sound technical, it really could end up reshaping who gets represented in America, how competitive elections are, or even legitimate they are, and how much power voters actually have for years to come.